Now, Malaz, kindly just leave your paper book for the moment. I'll tell your lordships what the contours of my submission are. Malaz, this is a case in which the 2025 Act has been framed, Malaz, for the purposes of protection of waqfs. But in reality, it is designed to capture waqfs through a process which is non-judicial, through a process which is executive, through a process in which those to whom this property belongs, because waqf can't be created without, except through private properties owned by the individual concerned. So private properties are being taken away only because there is some dispute. We don't know what the nature of the dispute is. And when that dispute happens, Malaj, a person is appointed who is higher than the collector, and that person will decide the dispute on his own. He will give a report, but by the time, Malaj, that report is given, we don't have the time frame. And within that, Malaj, while that report is pending, the waqf property is taken away. And
taken away without following due procedure?
Yes, and without following any procedure. I'll demonstrate all that to your lordships. Taken away with, and Malaj, the dispute is whether this is government property or my property. He will decide that. He is a nominee of the government, Malaj, who is higher than the collector. So the government decides its own dispute without any judicial procedure. And while that dispute is pending, while that report is pending, the property is taken away. It is no longer waqf property. And there is no procedure. And anybody can create a dispute. So this is one aspect of the matter, which is in the context of what I say, it was designed to take over and capture waqf properties. That's number one. Number two, Malaj, what is a waqf? A waqf, Malaj, is a endowment to Allah, to God. A dedication to Allah, to God. And that, pursuant to that dedication, that property can't be dealt with in terms of transfer. You can't transfer that property to anybody. Once a waqf is always a waqf. That's the very concept of a waqf, Malaj. In other words, if I have, Malaj, in fact, dedicated my piece of property, because I cannot dedicate somebody else's piece of property. And the historical reason behind it, let me just tell your lordships that, is that, as your lordship knows, under our constitution, Malaj, the state cannot possibly finance religious institutions. Cannot finance, Malaj. If there's a mosque, Malaj, the state cannot finance it for its upkeep. If, Malaj, there is a burial ground, this has to be created through private property. So what happens is, Malaj, that people at the end of their lives, Malaj, give their private property dedicated to God, so that those who come later, Malaj, can take advantage of that property. There are no earnings there, Malaj. If you go to a burial ground, Malaj, nobody earns. People come to bury their dead bodies, Malaj, and they charge a certain amount through which they maintain that. If you go to a mosque, Malaj, there's not a chadhava, Malaj, like in temples. They don't have 1,000 crores, 2,000 crores, 3,000 crores, Malaj. There are no chadhavas in mosques. So those have to be maintained. And how are they going to be maintained? Through the kind of monies that we collect through processes, Malaj, of charity. That's all.
That happens in other religions also. When temples are...
No, but temples, Malaj, people give, as your lordship knows, Malaj, there are chadhavas that are given, Malaj, and temples are, in terms of, Malaj,
but even in the
mosque.
I visit dargahs also, I visit churches also, everybody...
Dargahs and mosques dargahs and mosques are different. Dargahs and mosques are I'm talking about a mosque, Malaj. Your lordship is right. On dargah, it's different. But I'm talking about mosques. So what I was trying to say was, Malaj, the ways to preserve these properties is through these kind of efforts that are made by the community. Right? Now, Malaj, what they say is that if anybody, supposing an encroacher creates a dispute, that property will lose its character as waqf property as long as the dispute is pending. This is what the Act says. So you have a situation, Malaj, where actually there was a Waqf Act. You just note this, Malaj. There was a Waqf Act of 2013. 2013. Will you allow me? 2013, then, 1913, 1923, 1923.
First in 1923.
1913. 1913, then 1923, then
1913, 1913. 1913.
1913, then 1923, then 1954, then 1984, then 1995, then 2013 and 2025. This is Malad's the history of it.
Sequence.
Yes.
Just factually, 84 and 2013 are amendments, not the.
No, I'm talking about the act.
Yes.
Correct? So, Malad, therefore, and I will demonstrate to your lordships that the 2025 Act is a complete departure from the past. I tell your lordships how. There are two concepts in law called waqf by user and a dedication which is made. Right. If you give a dedication, Malads, and you pass away, and that property is used, Malads, for the purposes of the dedication, it becomes a waqf by user. And it's perpetuity. Because that's the concept of waqf. Once a waqf, always a waqf. All right, Malads? Now that waqf by user has been done away. A concept that is recognized in the Babri Masjid case, saying waqf by user is a practice, a religious practice, that has continued for hundreds of years. That's the five-judge bench, Malads. And whether it's a waqf by user or not is a matter of evidence. But they've done away with it. How have they done away with it? They say that in the 1913 Act, the 1923 Act, the 1954 Act, and the later acts, there was a requirement for registration. And because you did not register, Malads, therefore, any waqf which is not registered will not be regarded as waqf. So many of these waqfs by users were created 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 200 years ago, Malads, 500 years ago. Where will you
But
get
is
them?
it a matter of fact that under those enactments, 1913, 1923 and so on, is there a requirement for registration?
There was.
So is it a mandatory or
It will, no, they shall be registered, they said. But Malads, the consequences of non-registration were not set up in the Act. The consequences of non-registration, this is the first time in the 2025.
I have not gone through anything because I had,
You know, that's why, Malads, I'm broadly telling your lordships what my submissions are going to
I
be.
have not gone through it. I'll be frank, so you'll have to start from ABCD.
Yes.
Just as a matter of information, as whether under the old act,
Yes.
the provision was for registration was mandatory or directly?
The expression used was shall.
Merely using shall may not make it mandatory.
Correct.
Were there any consequences provided in those acts for non-registration? If consequences are provided, then it will be mandatory. Whether word shall is used or not.
No, Malads, the consequences were not that it will not be regarded as a waqf. That was never the consequence.
Was there anything that on account of registration of a particular?
You won't be regarded as, no,
Something
that's,
will happen.
no, there's no consequence that you will not be regarded as a waqf. It will continue as a waqf.
But there were consequences.
No, not this consequence.
But there were
so-
For
other
the caretaker, there may be consequences, but not
Please,
this consequence.
record your submission.
Yes, please.
That though under the old act, there were requirement for registration, but they were not mandatory because the consequences for non-registration were not provided under those acts.
For the purposes of deciding,
On account of non-registration,
yes,
nothing was to be happened.
yes,
Like suppose if there is under certain act, mandatory duty is there. You have to do such and such thing within a particular period.
correct.
And if you don't do that, then you will be required to pay 1,000 rupees fine or 1 lakh rupees fine. So no such provision is there.
No, the only thing was, Malads, that the act said that the mutawalli who has not done it is made culpable. That's all. He loses his right to continue as a mutawalli.
That's all. There
So
was
that's all. That I said to your lordships, and I stand by that. There were no consequences provided that it will no longer be regarded as waqf.
no,
Which is
no other consequences were there.
no other consequences. Which is why the 2025 takes that away.
So
Therefore, it's a complete departure.
do we record that?
Yes, your lordships may record it. It's a complete departure from the
No, that
19...
under the 2013, 1913, Till what was the last 2013?
till 2013. The status of the Waqf,
2013.
yeah,
Though,
the status and character of the Waqf.
though
continue.
there was a provision
Yes,
for registration of
yes, yes.
a work, no consequences were provided for non-compliance,
Right.
except removal of a mutawalli.
Correct, because he is responsible for registration of the Waqf.
So there, except removal of a mutawalli,
Yes. Consequences qua the mutawalli.
not a trust, not a work.
Ah, correct. Well, that's for the community, Malat. So because he did not register, he will suffer the consequences, but the character of the Waqf will not change and cannot. This changes it. I'm just giving you losses broadly. This changes the character of the Waqf. It says if you're not registered under these acts, then you're no longer Waqf. That's number one.
हेलो, कहाँ जा रहे हैं? ऐसे ही इंटरेस्टिंग वीडियो देखने के लिए आप हमारे चैनल को लाइक करें, सब्सक्राइब करें और शेयर करें। यदि आप फेसबुक, इंस्टाग्राम और ट्विटर पर देख रहे हैं तो डिस्क्रिप्शन में लिंक है, उसे भी जाकर फॉलो कर लें। धन्यवाद।